James Bond's 25th film and Daniel Craig's final outing as 007 finally hit the theaters this year. Is the film up to snuff, or does Mr. Bond get snuffed out? Find out when Johnny Torch reviews No Time to Die. Welcome again to another Johnny Torch review. This time we're taking on the long-awaited 007 outing, No Time to Die. I saw this one about 2 weeks ago. It took me quite a while to get to doing a video of it because I was under the weather. My voice wasn't quite up to snuff. And I tried to do it last week after doing an hour live stream, and my voice was just too shot. So hopefully it lasts this time. We're going to do a review sort of the way I've been doing them the past couple of years, with a sort of free form, off the top of my head review, because there's a lot to talk about with this movie, and just doing the little soundbite version probably wasn't going to cut it. Before we start, I always preface my talking about James Bond by admitting that I am sort of the fair weather fan. I am not a connoisseur of James Bond. So that may skewer my, uh, interpretation of this movie. I think this will be a very polarizing movie amongst fans. I'll say, before we get into spoilers, I loved it. I thought it was a great movie. There were some problems that are spoilerish that I'm not going to get into right this second. But if you're just looking for a simple thumbs up or thumbs down, I say it's a big thumbs up. I enjoyed this one a lot. And as I said, I certainly haven't seen all the James Bond films. I've seen most of them, and I've seen probably some of them in some stage, either near the end or in bits and pieces over the past years. But I have seen all the Daniel Craig films, and I purposefully went and watched Spectre before I seen this one, because Spectre was the only one I hadn't seen. The only other Bond film I had seen up at the theaters was actually Skyfall, which actually was, of course, very good. It was a popular entry. Spectre not as much, although I did enjoy it. I don't know why fans seemingly didn't take to that one as much. But I would say, of the Daniel Craig era Bond films, if I were to rank them, we'll start off with a ranking. Why not? I'm going to say I would put No Time to Die first. I think that was the best. Next, you have, obviously Casino Royale. And there's such a polar opposite between these two films, because I think No Time to Die treads more into the traditional Bond elements that one expects. This one really delivered it all, everything that I expected in a Bond film and was looking forward to. Casino Royale is just a strong movie on its own, but the reason why it appeals to me is, of course, I'm a sucker for an origin film, and that's basically what Craig's Bond is a series of origin films. The first three, I suppose, at any rate. I don't know. But seeing how it all came together is like its greatest strength and weakness. I like seeing it come together, but then again, there's not as many staples that are from the Bond franchise, I think, in that film. After that, it gets tough. I kind of liked Spectre and Skyfall equally. I think Skyfall has the benefit of a stronger villain in Silva. Although, while saying that, I did like Spectre a lot. I put them sort of on equal footing. For the purposes of ranking, I'll say Skyfall, then Spectre, but I kind of did like them both equal. And, of course, at the end is Quantum of Solace, which, again, gets kind of like scorn from fans. I didn't think it was a horrible movie, but I think it was clearly weaker, especially coming after a strong film like Casino Royale. So anyway, that is the end of the non-spoiler section. If you don't want to hear any of the spoilers or you haven't seen the film yet, I strongly encourage you to see it first because, as I said, it's a very good film, and you'll have to come up with your own conclusions on whether it strays too far or perhaps is a little bit beyond the pale of the 007 franchise. But again, for me, as a non, you know, as someone who hasn't explored the lore quite as much, it felt very much in keeping with that James Bond tradition. And again, check it out before you see spoilers. But now, spoiler alert, here we are with our No Time to Die review. As I said, I really enjoyed this one. This one picks up off the heels of Spectre, another film, like I said, I thought was very good. The actress, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, Leah Seydoux. Very good, I thought, as Madeline, who is the apparent true love of James Bond. Maybe it could have been Vesper, but she wasn't around long enough. And things starting to heat up between them. It seems like Bond retires every other movie in this franchise, but Bond is set to retire and live out his days in peace and relaxation. He thinks with Madeline, of course, things take a bad turn, and he finds he can no longer trust her. The film plays out telling a lot of Madeline's backstory as well, which I thought was pretty good. She's a very interesting character in her own right. She has ties to the film's villain, Safin, played by Rami Malek, who I thought was very good here. This is a very interesting character. I think a lot of reviewers have touched on probably the weakness of this villain, which is that at a certain point, he starts off, let's put it this way, he starts off as a revenge-minded villain, which of course makes a lot of sense. But when he has the grand villain plan in the last act, it doesn't really feel earned. It feels like he kind of said, well, I got rid of all my enemies pretty much. Now I'll just use this weapon on everybody. And I think maybe a couple of minutes of trying to flesh out the purpose for that might have helped. I think they did the best they could. They have, of course, the traditional Bond and Bond villain conversation where he sort of, explains his plans for conquering the world or whatever. And I think they tried to sort of highlight it in that conversation, but I think possibly that's the only weakness of this character. He wasn't in it quite as much as I suppose I'd like, but there really wasn't too much of a place to showcase him. This is a very big movie. And when I say big, it's also long, but it never feels overly long, or at least it didn't to me. A lot of action, and when they do slow down the pace maybe 2 or 3 times in the film, it basically is only to give important plot information, and then it just goes right back and ramps up to 11. So, again, I think it was a pretty good performance. Rami Malek is, a great actor. He can play this kind of weird, creepy character that, between his delivery and the sort of facial makeup that they put on him, he makes for a quite enigmatic villain. I thought he was quite good. As for Nomi, which is Lashana Lynch's character, a lot was made of this character. A lot was made of her participation in the movie. All of it was to build up the idea, apparently, in potential viewers' minds that the film was going to be woke and that Lashana Lynch was going to replace 007 and carry on as the new James Bond, because everybody knew this was Craig's last movie. And I have to tell you, there is not really anything woke about this. I mean, they could have... I thought she was a great character. I think what they probably would have done maybe 30 years ago was have this character played by another white guy. That's the only thing where probably this was updated for the times. But it certainly didn't come off as woke. Nomi does get his 007 designation because he's retired. And she tries to one-up him several times. And he's unflappable, Bond. He's still... you can't get under his skin. And she tries, and she fails at every turn. And She basically tries to outdo him at his job and fails at every turn. He basically constantly is putting her in her place. So to try to say that they made this character overbearing or, horning in on all the action, it's completely false. That doesn't happen at all. And it's a shame that the marketing and the tabloid style clickbait stuff probably turned off a lot of people with just that thought that that was the way it was going to be. She's not in it too much. For what she does in it is fine. And we really didn't need more of her. And, you know, some have speculated that maybe in the long time between the film's completion and the release of the film, that perhaps maybe they cut some of those scenes that were intended to be more woke. I didn't notice anything appearing that jarring, so I don't think that anything that was in there was taken out. It doesn't appear that way anyway. Usually you can tell if large portions of character or motivation or something are taken out. No, it didn't seem like that in this. So again, that was a sad, unfortunate byproduct of the marketing, which really shouldn't have been. Another thing that was marketed up, of course, was Paloma, the beautiful Anna de Armas, and she has a great centerpiece action scene in the middle of the film. Of course, this is where Daniel Craig sort of really he captures sort of that old school Bond vibe around this point in the film. He goes to Cuba and tries to effect a mission of sorts to collect this Russian agent. He gets helped by Paloma, who's sort of the old school type Bond girl. And, she comes across as very ditzy at first, but she apparently can handle herself and knows how to take care of business. She's a very fun character. And in a way, I'm disappointed that we don't see more of her. But I think, again, given the parameters of what this film had to accomplish, I don't see where they could have put more of her in it. So again, I think it's kind of just a sad byproduct of the film that she's in, but she brings a lot to the film by being in it. And again, the film runtime, it doesn't seem very long to me anyway. So, you would think that the sheer length of the movie is the reason why they couldn't afford to add little extra bits in like that. They had to have some kind of conception of how the time was going to run at nearly 3 hours, 2 hours and 45 minutes. Obviously, you couldn't do too much with every character, and that's why I'm kind of grading these characters on the curve. I don't think it would have been possible to force more Paloma or Safin. I think they had probably the right amount of screen time given what they had to do in this film. Daniel Craig, let's talk about him for a second. He's been kind of a diva. Let's be honest about this, playing James Bond. I think he honestly would have stopped playing Bond after the second film if he could. It seems at least like he's been complaining about playing Bond forever since I forget. We've actually covered on the news roundup leading up to No Time to Die some of the stories of him complaining about it, how he'd rather do himself bodily harm rather than play Bond again. But of course, I think he was contracted for 3 films and he was coaxed back for 4 and 5. But he does a great job here, and he feels like he's gotten himself into the role of Bond now. I mean, like I said, from Casino Royale to here, he does feel like he's grown into a fully formed James Bond at this point. They have a lot of great moments. There's the great henchman, of course, and one of the henchmen is dubbed Cyclops, and Bond uses an old, maybe Roger Moore-esque one-liner on him when he dispatches him with the watch Q gave him, and he says, I showed him the watch and it blew his mind. That kind of stuff was really fun, and it was really cool to feel that he's kind of stepped into sort of that area now where he's not just sort of the fledgling Bond. Now he can crack a joke. Now he can be wise, and of course all the staples are still there where he says Bond, James Bond, and the vodka martini, shaken not stirred. A lot of the gadgets in the car and all the great set pieces, they're all there. The action, This is a more brutal Bond than probably I've seen in a while. I think maybe Skyfall showed about as brutal a side as Craig has ever shown as Bond, but I mean, in this one, he literally has a body count that rivals Rambo. I mean, he is just taking everybody out left and right, hand over fist. And again, it's really exciting. There's some great set pieces. Of course, the beginning of the film with the it's like a car chase type scene. Um, and getting to like we'll get to the resolution here now, but where the secrets come out. He has a great forest action sequence where he's protecting Madeline, where she returns into the story, and they reunite, and he's protecting her and apparently his daughter that she's had in the intervening 5 years, and that is really exciting as well. That scene. Um, a couple other things. We get Felix Leiter again, and unfortunately they killed him off. See, again, this is sort of we're getting into the really heavy spoil section. I try to hold some of the stuff back for now, but of course, Felix Leiter comes back into it. I'm familiar with him from a couple of the films. He's a reoccurring member. He's probably in every second or third Bond film, and unfortunately, he's killed in this one. At the time, I was kind of thinking maybe they're killing him off just for that purpose of saying, well, this is the last movie and the stakes are high. That's not the end of the killing. Let's put it that way. But and I thought it was a greatly acted scene. Again, going back to Craig and how he's grown in this role. You really feel that Bond is like, he's not gonna let his friend die, and he's gonna do everything he can, but unfortunately, it just is not enough. For a film called No Time to Die, there are quite a few deaths. The next, sort of series all-star character, Blofeld, of course, makes a return in this film, and he's eventually dispatched as well. And Christoph Waltz, again, I think I don't really know what people expected of him. I think he did a pretty good job here. He plays sort of like a Magneto is what he reminded me of. He's in this glass case that's rolling out to the interrogation room, and he can't be uncuffed and so on and so forth because of the danger he poses. And again, another good back and forth scene between them two. But then, of course, he ends up being killed because Safin worked something out with Madeline. This is something that kind of, again, kind of a nitpick, but when you stop and think of it, Safin in his revenge plot basically destroys all of Spectre. Safin does something that James Bond can't do in this film. I think that was something that was kind of unfortunate. I don't think that's like a real downer for me, but it does seem like he managed to take out the entire, I guess, hierarchy of Spectre in the Cuba scene, and then it's basically because of him that Blofeld is taken out. I don't know. It's kind of just worked out that way. Safin, of course, also figures prominently in Madeline's backstory. I thought that was good. I thought that was interesting. I thought he was going to have some more kind of superhuman element to him because he gets shot in the beginning of the movie, and some people speculated that maybe that was just like a plot element that was cut out, but I guess we're just led to believe it was like a bulletproof vest or something. But I did like that. See, some people probably will complain about Safin's character. I think maybe his world domination plans were not probably that strong, but I like the strange sort of comparison he makes between himself and Madeline. It's like Spectre killed her parents, basically. I mean, I suppose Mr. White killed himself, and Mr. White killed his parents on the behalf of Spectre, and so he kind of feels some kind of strange kindred spirit with her, and he killed her mother, and tries to kill her, but then he spares her. It's a very strange and bizarre thing, but I kind of like that weirdness where this guy's just so weird enough that he thinks that he's kind of met his kindred spirit, and he's kind of he even basically says to Bond that he's like the reflection of him. And that's always cool when you can play into that like evil double of the hero. That's something else that I liked about Safin too, and how this whole thing sort of played out. So like I said, going into the last act, uh we had three really good henchmen really here. Of course, like I said, I mean we had like two henchmen, and then I guess, Safin being the main villain. And Blofeld being a main villain too. But Cyclops is taken out. That was pretty cool. And the other one, who I affectionately named Guy Smiley, Bond refers to him as the Book of Mormon. Uh, Logan Ash, I believe, is his name in the movie. It's been about 2 weeks since I seen it. I can't remember exactly. Is it Logan Ash or Ash Logan? I think it's Logan Ash. But he gets like one of probably the best villain deaths in the movie, where Bond like demolishes his van or whatever it is, and he sort of like crawls out, and he basically topples the van on top of Logan. And that was like such a great scene. It's like, this is for you, Felix. He got an ignominious death, particularly because of killing Felix. Speaking of that, the death of Safin is another element that I think could have been elaborated on. It could have been stronger. And I think the problem was they didn't want to overshadow Bond's death, which was going to be coming up shortly. And yes, I probably sort of bearing the lead there, but yes, Bond dies in this film. Bond just shoots Safin, and while it's okay, you would kind of hope for the guy that essentially kills Bond. I mean, because no matter which way you look at it, from some point of view, Safin's responsible for Bond's death. I mean, it could be blamed on a myriad of things, but it wouldn't have happened if he didn't contaminate Bond with this poison, which is sort of the big MacGuffin in the film. The poison that is like DNA processed to only kill certain people. And M's responsible for creating it, and Ralph Fiennes again reprising the role, doing a great job. And you get to see the familiar faces, Moneypenny and Q. They all had their moments, which were very good. So again, this is basically the death of Bond. Let's just get into that right now. So now, as most of you well know, I am not a fan of killing the protagonist. I am not a fan of killing the hero at some point. I think when you kill the hero, there's so many different problems that brings about. On the one hand, you're saying that the hero is sort of just lucky, or his luck ran out, or he was just bound to fail eventually, and I think it kind of loses the mystique of the character when you do that, particularly, I suppose, in James Bond's case, as a guy that's always known for getting out alive. Does that, make the character lose some luster? I don't know. Again, as looking at this completely, as I said, perhaps irreverentially, I think there's two different ways to look at it. On the one hand, I originally thought that it was probably a better ending, a more melancholy ending, if you want to make it a somber ending, that he couldn't touch his wife, well, his girlfriend and daughter again. That's probably enough punishment for any man for the rest of his life. But I guess, you could use that to sort of reinforce the harsh and unforgiving Bond, that master assassin and so forth. That could be used as great fuel to continue him on for the next actor, and keep sort of this more grounded pace going. But again, you risk taking a lot of that fun element out if you always know that he's got a woman and child to the side somewhere that he can never see again, and that he, I guess, just makes phone calls or Zoom calls on the weekend. It just didn't feel like you could sit with that if you're going to keep the series going. So I kind of understand why they did that from an intellectual standpoint, having him just die. Um, the way they did it again, we sat through the whole credits. Me and my brother, we sat through the whole credits, and you don't really think there's going to be an after credit scene, but you were kind of hoping at some point they would pop up with some kind of Easter egg to show that, well, he survived. Well, no, he didn't. It was quite clear that the missile struck him on that island. It seemed plausible that he could escape, and he sustained several injuries, but you would still think he might be able to escape before that island thing was completely destroyed and demolished. There seems to be a common trope nowadays where it's like you have to see the hero from birth to death. And one of the problems I think that the Daniel Craig 007 films have is that they did try to borrow kind of heavily from Nolan's The Dark Knight series. And one of the weakest parts of the Dark Knight series is the ending where Batman just wants to give up and retire. And that comes from Nolan being a Bond fan, and I think that's kind of where he would have took Bond if he had the chance. Thankfully, he didn't have the nerve to go all the way and kill Batman, which is basically what the scuttlebutt was leading up to that film, and all the, you know, signs during the film point out that Batman's probably going to die. Thankfully, it's one of those cases where subverted expectations were much appreciated, because again, I don't like ending a franchise on the main protagonist dying. Now, looking at it from another perspective, I do have to say, when you kill off a character, I go back to Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan being sort of the gold standard. They did it best. And I think, to the film's credit, which is why I regard this film so highly, why I'm giving it such a high ranking, putting it as the best of the Bond films, I think, to its credit, it does make the death seem natural. I don't necessarily think that the film, you go into it thinking, oh, this is the last Bond film, he's going to die. You don't go through the whole action of the film thinking, oh, they're setting up the death of Bond. I think this just seems to happen, or maybe this is because, like I said, I'm not too versed in the lore. It seemed like it was a natural progression of events. Now, like I said, all things being equal, could James Bond have survived? Yes, he could. It probably would have been more appropriate, so to speak, if he had a no other option fate. In this case, he sort of goes up to the top of the mountain there and accepts his fate. If he were like forced to do something the way Spock was, where somebody had to go into the reactor room and fix the warp core or whatever, in this case, he's sort of just resigned to his fate. That might be the only way that it could have been improved upon. But honestly, comparing it to some of the bad hero deaths in recent film, especially when you look at The Force Awakens. Now, you knew that Harrison Ford did not want to play Han Solo again. You knew Han Solo was going to die before you sat down at the beginning of the film. And you could hope against hope that maybe he wasn't going to die, but you knew in the back of your mind he was going to die. Same thing with Generations, Star Trek, with Captain Kirk. As soon as he shows up in Generations, you know he's there to die. You know he is going to be killed off. I did not feel that way about this movie. I did not feel that James Bond was put into this movie to die. And I think that's something that the film should be commended for. It's still, it still gets a middling disappointment in the ending for me, because I think he should have survived, or they could have made a more compelling way for him to die. But if you are going to do the hero death, you have the fun adventure. You make the rest of the movie as good, if not better, than the ending. So when the ending comes, you feel like that you've at least experienced a movie. You don't feel like you've experienced a contractual obligation where the actor says, this is my last film, send me out in a blaze of glory. And again, there's a good way of doing that. There's a bad way of doing that. The bad way is, the Han Solo route, the Captain Kirk route. The right way to do it is the Mr. Spock route and the James Bond route. Again, they could have, perhaps tightened up the death and made it a little more of a heroic death, so to speak, and not just a, deciding to succumb to the end. But again, that was the story they were telling. Because I mean, because well, he didn't want to live because he couldn't, touch his family members there again. But the thing is if he survived, one would think that technology would emerge that would perhaps be able to cure him. You're giving up on the cure before you've even had time to process the disease. You know what I mean? I think in a sense that is the problem with the death scene. You kind of have to hold out hope. And like I said, they did try to factor in extenuating circumstances that he was sort of beat up and couldn't get out of the fortress in time. But again, so that pretty much is it. There you have it. I think it was a fantastic, you know, 2.5 hours, and perhaps like maybe the last 10 minutes was, questionable of whether you want to see another famous franchise have their protagonist go down. And unfortunately, this seems to be the way. But again, another thing that I think separates this from other films and other franchises is I think that with James Bond, you've always got the perpetual renewal. You always know that he's coming back. And again, we stayed to the end credits to see, and I know from a fact, from seeing several films, that they always end with James Bond will return. And of course, that is the comfort in this film, is to stay to the end credits and see that wonderful title come up saying James Bond will return. And that's what I think also takes away some of the sting of this death, is that James Bond's coming back. He's rebooted. Well, see, that's not fair to say rebooted, but I say he's renewed every 10 years, basically. He's renewed for, the 60s to the very early 70s. Sean Connery for the 70s to early 80s. Roger Moore. Pierce Brosnan took over the 90s. And Craig did the better part of the 2000s. It's always going to be renewed. Now, the difference being here is that Craig was actually rebooting the franchise. There was really nothing, apart from Judi Dench, there was nothing really held over. This was seen as an origin. So if this is sort of a diversion of the timeline, you can honestly pick up with the next James Bond after Die Another Day. And the Craig series will be just a rebooted area of the large James Bond alternate universes, I suppose. And it'll still exist. And that's why I don't think it's necessarily the worst thing. Now, I know, like I said, a lot of Dyed in the Wool fans will probably feel like this is like the end. But it's different here than it is in any other franchise. For example, if Harrison Ford kills off Indiana Jones in Indiana Jones 5 and does a death scene, chances are you're not going to get another Indiana Jones film. Or if you do, you're going to take it that it is that rebooted universe, that it has nothing to do with Raiders and Temple and Crusade and so forth. With this, it was only existing in its own 5-movie arc to begin with. It kind of feels to me like, we stopped the Bond franchise per se to do these series of films, and then we are going to pick up now. It doesn't feel quite like a finality to me as it would with another franchise. So again, like I said, high marks. I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to give this film 4.5 stars out of 5. That's an A minus. And again, I think the beginning was great. I'm going to take like a half a point off for the death, kind of not wanting it. But, there is there is such a thing as having a happily ever after, a happy ending to a character that's long lived. And, that's kind of where I came from with The Dark Knight Rises. It's like, well, if we have to end it and say Batman ends his career, all right, that's not the worst way he could go out. In this case, they took obviously a more somber approach. But like I said, the preceding film leading up to it was just great grade A material. So great stuff there. All right, so let me know what you think in the comments below. How did you feel about 007 No Time to Die? And the final film in the Daniel Craig series of James Bond. What do you think are the possibilities going forward in the future for the character of James Bond? Is it going to be a diversity hire? I'm pretty sure Barbara Broccoli has come out saying that they're not going to choose a woman to be the next Bond. Of course, there's always a possibility it's going to be a race change James Bond. Of course, Idris Elba's name always being thrown into consideration. Are they going to go with the more typical looking James Bond that we've always had, such as a Henry Cavill or something along that line? What would you prefer? Let me know in the comments below. And until next we meet, this is Johnny Torch reminding you once again, keep the flame burning brightly, and I'll be with you again real soon.